Hey guys, it's Jonathan Lickstein here, back with another episode of The Noble Broker. Today we have a special guest. We're going outside of mainstream real estate, but going into the legal aspect of what is so important to not only holding, but retaining and protecting that real estate you work so hard to attain for yourself and for your customers. So today I want to welcome attorney Hillel Presser. Welcome, Hillel.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming in and talking about the scary stuff in real estate that we really don't like to discuss.
The fun stuff.
I agree with you. I'm third generation, the first person in my family not to be an attorney. So when we go to our family gatherings, I'm sure it's like yours. There's a lot of arguing and cases being brought up from historical arguments.
Well, you made the right choice. and I joke. I tell people I am the lawyer that hates lawyers. You know, there's so many lawyers out there in every city trying to find a way to sue you, how to take your money. I'm one of only a few in the entire country that does nothing but teach you how to protect it. So I joke and say I'm the lawyer that hates lawyers.
You protect everybody else from the predatory lawyers that come after us.
Correct.
And Lord knows in real estate, there are lots of them.
Oh, it's crazy. You know, lawsuits, and look, being down here in South Florida, I mean, it's so litigious, so frivolous, but lawsuits have really become, you know, the next biggest business. Last time I checked, there was probably about 100 million lawsuits every single year, and that number is only growing. There's a 1 in 4 chance you'll be sued in the next 12 months. The average person and business is sued 5 times over their lifetime. And the craziest, scariest stat I ever heard was you are 7 times more likely to face a lawsuit than get into a car accident.
And we've been in some car accidents, so that means you've been in some lawsuits. So you're an asset protection attorney, both privately and with businesses. And that's not something you just wake up and say, I want to be an asset protection attorney. So how did you do this? How did you get into this?
You know, it's funny because growing up, my uncle was one of the first personal injury attorneys to ever advertise on TV. So growing up, I worked at his office, and I probably would have thought that I would have been a personal injury attorney. And my whole life, I loved law, knew I was going to be a lawyer, and my whole life, I loved business. It was always very entrepreneurial. I never even in my life heard of asset protection. You know, if you figure there's 50 or a couple hundred real estate attorneys in every city, or 50 or a couple hundred criminal or estate planning attorneys in every city, there may be 5 or 10 asset protection attorneys in the entire country that probably get 80% of the business. So I never even heard about it. And then when I was in law school, I found out about asset protection, actually because there was an asset protection attorney who was working with my family. And when I found that out, I said, this is 110% what I want to do. To me, it was that perfect marriage of business and law.
Interesting. How does an asset protection attorney differ from estate planning attorneys?
Sure. And people confuse them all the time, so it's a great question. What I tell people is the easiest way to differentiate is asset protection deals with life and estate planning deals with death. So asset protection deals with life, estate planning deals with death. So what estate planning attorneys do is they want to make sure when you pass away, how do they make sure that your assets go where you want them to go, hopefully quickly, privately, less taxes and less lawyer fees. While on the other hand, asset protection deals with life. What we do is we make sure that all of your assets are uncollectible and judgment proof and protected while you're alive. So if you get sued, nobody can take what you worked so hard for. If you don't protect what you have while you're alive, from an asset protection planning point of view, you'll have nothing to pass on from an estate planning point of view. So asset protection protects what you have while you're alive. Estate planning makes sure your assets go where you want them to go when you pass away.
I feel like there's a lot of that kind of goes hand in hand. So I'm sure you have a relationship or people that you pass clients or recommend clients to work with for their estate planning stuff and vice versa.
Yeah, you know, we have estate planning attorneys in-house and tax planning attorneys and business succession planning specialists. And to me, you have to have an integrated plan. So what I tell clients is the first thing you need to do is protect your assets. If you don't protect your assets, there's nothing to pass on. The second thing you need to do is make sure you have a good estate plan. Make sure that the assets go where you want them to go when you pass. And then thirdly, make sure that you can do so with the least amount of taxes that are legally and ethically possible. So when I'm working with a client, our goal is, while you're alive, take your chips off the table, make yourself uncollectible and judgment proof so you never need to start over, and then have an integrated plan so when you pass away, make sure that the assets go where you want them to go, quickly, privately, less taxes, less lawyer fees, and you want to make sure that you have an intergenerational plan. So you want to make sure that your kids don't have the same problems that you have. You want to put a plan together so when your kids receive the assets, they're protected as well, because you don't want the kids losing the assets to a divorce or a car accident or a slip and fall on a piece of real estate.
You know, it's funny you say that. I think our kids inherit our problems no matter what. We give them something good and something bad. It's just the way the cookie crumbles.
I always say, my kids get everything good from my wife, everything bad from me. So
I'll take that. So when you're talking about 2024, number one, I'm super happy it is in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
It was an interesting, both personally and professionally, year for me. And you look at how litigious the real estate industry has been. I'm sure you're familiar with the headlines that have been out there. So are these the types of claims or the types of suits that can be protected using asset protection, or is that more for, we're talking class action, right? That's a different animal than others. So how does that play into what realtors, brokers, business owners should be thinking when it comes to asset protection?
Yeah, so it's a long-winded question, which is fine, but I think you got to start with the basics. So, first of all, I love real estate. I buy as much real estate as I can. I'm a big fan, always have been. But real estate can also be a liability if it's not purchased correctly. So from a personal perspective, if you buy a duplex and it's $400,000, I'm just making up an example as we go, if you don't buy it properly, well, if you get sued, you can lose the duplex. And most people want that duplex to be an investment, part of their retirement. They don't want to lose it. So people need to make sure that when they buy that duplex, they buy it correctly. Instead of buying it, in their personal name, make sure they buy it in a protective entity like an LLC. Even worse than losing the duplex is that if somebody gets injured on a property that you own, they can sue you and come after everything you own. So if you take that same duplex example, if you own the duplex in your name, somebody gets injured, they can sue you, not only take the duplex, take any other real estate that you have, any money in the bank, any shares in companies that you have, et cetera, et cetera. But again, if you buy the duplex correctly, in an LLC, a protective entity, then if somebody gets injured on the duplex, they can't sue you. They can only sue the LLC. So the first most important thing is just how you buy and own real estate. Anytime you buy a piece of real estate that is not your primary home, you always want to buy it in a protective entity, in an LLC. That way, A, if you get sued, you don't lose the asset. And B, if somebody gets injured on the property, they can't sue you personally. Now, of course, that opens us up to dozens of other conversations, right? So if you have 4 duplexes, do you put them all in the same LLC, or do you put them in different LLCs? And I'm sure the lawyer's favorite answer is...
It depends.
It depends, right? So it's funny because, if you take those 4 pieces of property, those 4 duplexes, and you put them in one LLC, well, if somebody gets injured on property number 2, they can take property 1, 2, 3, and 4. If instead you take those 4 duplexes and you put them in 4 different LLCs, duplex 1 and LLC 1, duplex 2 and LLC 2, and so on and so forth, now if somebody gets injured on property 2, they can only go after property 2. So I always like to, separate our winners from losers, keep our eggs in different baskets. But with that being said, as we stated, it depends. So if a client comes into me and they have, 4 duplexes and they're worth $400,000 each, I am definitely advising them, put them in 4 different LLCs, 1 property per LLC. On the other hand, if somebody comes in with 4 pieces of vacant land and they're worth $40,000 each, well, we have to do a cost-benefit analysis. In that case, I'd probably only create 1 LLC and I'd stick the 4 pieces of vacant land in it, because it's only $160,000.
And it makes a big difference. Are there people occupying the vacant land versus duplexes? How risk averse is the property itself?
Yeah, and people always say, well, isn't that why I have insurance? And I always tell people, look, I love insurance. I tell them, Buy as much as you can because it's cheap and it helps you sleep at night. But I'll tell you, just last week I saw 2 cases. One person owned a rental property and someone got sick from mold. They had a $10 million policy. Mold, if you look, exception, yep. If you look at the 4-point font, was only covered up to, it was either $5,000 or $10,000. I had another client last week. The dog unfortunately got out of the yard, allegedly knocked a lady down, injured a lady. Dog exclusion. So my father, growing up, would always tell me, son, the big print giveth, the small print taketh away. So I like insurance, but don't solely rely on it. You want to have your own asset protection plan to supplement your insurance, as many layers, as many firewalls as possible, and I call it belt and suspenders.
I had a broker call me a couple weeks ago, and they received a demand and a claim. It was a full civil filing, right? And in the complaint, it references a history of mold on the property, and their insurance provider denied their claim for protection for coverage on legal defense because it had the word mold in it. And anything in referring to mold is an exception to their policy. So they were left with, a $2 million policy, they were left with zero protection.
Yeah, and it's not just the mold, it's not just the dogs. I mean, you'll have, when a hurricane happens, or not even a hurricane, a windstorm, you have the insurance company fighting. Well, was it caused by wind? Was it caused by water? Was it caused by flooding? Oh, well, the light pole got knocked down, but the light poles in the parking lot's not attached to the building. So, you could fight back and forth with the insurance companies all day.
That is one thing that you will not get away from, it is fighting with the insurance company. That's something so many residents in Florida have had to deal with the past couple of years with these hurricanes.
It's unfortunate because, they're the, 8,000-pound gorilla, right? I mean, they have billions of dollars to fight you with, and, John Smith, who lives next door, I mean, he spends $15,000, $20,000 on legal fees, he's going to feel it.
So you're not originally from Florida, I can tell from your accent. Dead giveaway.
Yeah.
That's an estate planning giveaway. Yeah. Death, right? So how did you make it down to Florida, and where are you from originally?
So it's interesting. So believe it or not, I was born in Miami. However, I left when I was about 2 years old, so I don't remember much. And I moved to upstate New York, Rochester, New York, where I grew up for almost the first half of my life. I went to Syracuse University for undergrad, and then I came down for law school, probably well over 20 years ago, and just never left. I mean, it's a really great place to be, to live, to work, raise a family.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's funny. I
Gets
don't
worse.
really
Could
hear
be a lot
many
worse.
people mention Syracuse.
Yeah.
I have family up there. Go Orange.
Yeah, very cool.
That's awesome. So asset protection is your main focus. You seem like a wealth of knowledge, right? I know the last time we met, won't talk about it, but I learned a lot of information from you, Delaware Corps related to some others, and it's really hard to convey all of that information outside of like a website. So I understand you've published a book. How many books have you published?
I've written probably, I'm going to guess, about 6 or so.
Okay.
Or been involved. I mean, some I've done forward, some I was contributors, but 6 books plus or minus, and I speak all the time all across the country.
And the main theme is how you can protect yourself now and not be sued later.
Correct. Make sure you're proactive. I always tell people, people always ask me, when does asset protection not work? And there's 2 reasons. It's pretty simple. Number 1 is you have to do it before the fact. You have to be proactive. So, you can't go get in a terrible car accident and then, 2 years later think you're going to be protected. I'm not saying that there's nothing you can do. There are some things you can still do after the fact, but it's like anything. It's like going to a doctor. If you catch it, the earlier you catch it, the more protected you'll be. So I always tell people, you don't buy the car insurance after the accident. You don't buy the health insurance after you get sick. You don't buy the life insurance after the death. You always want to be proactive and make sure that you're protected before something happens. And then number 2, I always tell people, you have to honor thy structure. So, I could set up a great asset protection plan for anybody, but if they don't honor that structure, if they're ever in front of a judge a year or 10 years later, the judge is going to look at them and say, listen, if you didn't honor your structure, why should I honor it? So it's not just important to do things proactively, but once it's set up, you have to honor the structure. Don't commingle the funds. Don't commingle the assets, but just make sure that you're doing everything properly.
So what do you mean by that exactly? If you own a property, an investment property, and the rent is collected, don't have the rent paid to your personal,
Correct.
have the rent paid to that LLC, and then remit your ownership payments out of that to your personal or a salary.
Yeah, and it actually simplifies your life. So in that 4 duplex scenario example we gave earlier, if you have 4 duplexes and 4 LLCs, well, when you get rent from duplex number 2, it only goes in LLC 2. If you have a mortgage or insurance or tax payments or expenses for the duplex number 2, it only comes from LLC 2. If I create 4 different entities for you for 4 different pieces of real estate, and then you commingle the rent, commingle the expenses,
It's a waste of money.
you did everything for nothing. You got to follow the structure and honor the plan.
And that's where a good property manager can come into play and do it for you and put it in the right spots for you.
Yeah, people make mistakes, right? But if you pay out of the wrong account, you better make sure you reimburse that account. And it's one thing if it happens once or twice, we get it. But if you're just totally, disregarding, which people do all the time, I don't understand it. They'll set up these complicated structures, whether it's with me or with someone else, and they don't honor it. I'm not really sure why they did it in the first place, but you have to make sure you honor it.
So a big question that I get as a broker is agents always want to incorporate and become an LLC or a PA for their own transactions that they're assisting people with. And I know the tax benefits, those are readily apparent, and you see that year after year. But it's always done with the sentiment of either an LLC or a PA. How does this, they believe it protects their personal assets from anything involved in their business. What does it actually mean?
Sure. So look, it helps. There's nothing that's black or white. It's not like, hey, if you set up your PA or maybe your PLLC or your LLC, whatever it may be, you're going to be 110% protected. That's not the case because there's still some things that if you do personally, someone suing you could pierce their corporate veil and they could come after you personally. But what I tell people is, look, you're never going to be 110% protected. We're not magicians. But what you want to do is you want to make it so difficult, so expensive, if not impossible, for anybody to collect against you that they don't want to sue you in the first place. If they do sue you, you don't want to be the low-hanging fruit. We helped settle a $20 million lawsuit for $250,000, a $5 million judgment for $500,000. 98 or 99% of the population is not protected. Let the lawyers and the people go after them. Don't be the low-hanging fruit and make sure you're protected. So no matter how small the business, real estate or any business, I always recommend starting an entity for the business. In fact, it takes me back a long time ago. I had a partner, a mentor, he passed away, probably 15 years ago. And I remember him having a conversation with someone, I think it was from his neighborhood, and she sold dolls at the flea market. And I remember him saying that he told her, hey, create an LLC, create an entity for your doll business. And the woman almost laughed at him. She said, my doll business, you're talking pennies. Well, it wasn't the money that you make, it's the liability. So you know what happened. The doll poked out the eye of a baby. And because she was doing the doll business in her personal name, she was sued for millions and millions of dollars. Where if she would have just set up an entity, an LLC or a corporation, whatever it may be, they would have sued the company, which just had some old dolls.
Yeah.
So, super important.
So since the doll poked out a baby's eye, they could have had all the dolls that they want.
They can have the dolls, but they'd have to stop there.
Exactly. And that's the difference. It's not the value of what you're selling, it's what the liability is incurred after that.
Correct.
It's a great way to think about this.
Yeah, and we see that a lot with people. Like I'll have a client and they'll have, a boat, right? That's worth $10,000, or they'll have a golf cart that's worth $5,000. And I'm trying to show them what to do with it, and they look at me like I'm crazy. Well, I've seen the golf cart case where the golf cart turns over and someone loses their arm and it's a $7 million lawsuit. Well, if that golf cart's in your name, it's not covered under your homeowner's insurance, it's not covered under your car insurance. That golf cart needs to be in Toys LLC with a separate policy for $150 a year if you want to be protected. I've seen that $8,000 or $10,000 boat hit another boat, and even though it's small, one person passes away, one person goes to the ICU, and timing is always what happens, right? During that time, the person was selling their business for $40 million. So it's not always what asset are you protecting, it's what liability are you protecting against.
It's really funny. The golf cart's a great example, right? It's a $5,000, $8,000 golf cart, and okay, if it's totaled, whatever, that's fine. But anything that happens due to that golf cart or your usage of it,
You have a golf cart and it's in your name and you're sitting here right now on a podcast.
I'm not actually, so.
And, if a kid, one of your kids drives your golf cart or a friend or whatever, if they get in an accident, they get sued as the driver, but you're sued as the owner. So super important that things are titled properly, to make sure that, hey, while you're working and you're sitting here not doing anything wrong, you're not exposed.
That's it's something that most people don't think of. So don't be the person who's one event away from regretting not making that phone call sooner.
Absolutely.
And contact an asset protection person if you have the assets to protect, right?
Yeah, and everyone needs asset protection. I mean, it's just to different degrees, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I represent school teachers with $200,000. I represent billionaires with billions and billions of dollars, and everywhere in between. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do the same thing for the school teacher with $200,000 as I'm going to do for the billionaire or the professional athlete. But think about it. School teacher has $200,000. She gets sued for $1 million. She's wiped out. It's catastrophic. There's no coming back. Professional athlete or billionaire gets sued for $3 million. They're not happy. They still have a lot left. So I don't care how small the person thinks they are. The smaller you are, the more important the protection becomes.
So here's another piece, and this is going back to the insurance versus asset or liability issues. So I have a broker who called, not the mold issue, that's another one. I tend to be the ear for several brokers, so which is good. I learned from their experiences. So this broker had one of their agents showing a house. Okay, I believe it was their listing, and a woman comes in, doesn't see the step in the sunken living room. There's no tape, there's no indication. They trip over the step, hits her face, goes to the doctor, stitches, chipped tooth, all this good stuff, right? Poor lady, I felt bad for her. The pictures were included with the whole email. It was a little graphic. But they go in and they're suing. This woman is now suing, or was suing, the owner of the property, the listing agent, the listing broker who wasn't there, and the buyer's agent, the buyer's broker, who also didn't even know the house. And they're all just, every name goes on there to see what they can pull out of it. And the agent and the broker's an LLC, but they have their independent license. They can't make it an LLC. That's another interesting piece. And the real estate agent is not under a PA or LLC. Insurance is probably going to help the seller, the homeowner, and they're going to be covered because of general liability on their property. But the agent and the broker don't really have any protection in this sense. It should be general liability, not E&O, professional liability. What happens? How could they protect themselves? If they had been a PA or LLC, would this be different?
Sure. And it's scary, right? Because people don't care, right? If somebody wants to sue,
they're going to.
Not even that, it doesn't cost them anything. They can go on any street.
$300, $400 filing fee.
No, nothing, because they hire a lawyer for free on a contingency fee. So the lawyer, they hire for free, and I don't care where you're sitting, there's probably a lawyer within 5 miles of you that will take the case for free on a contingency fee. And what they do is they go to the lawyer, okay, and they say to the lawyer what happened, blah, 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 and the lawyer sues everyone. He doesn't care, he sues the 5 people, the 8 people, whatever it is, and he throws 40 things against the wall, and he just hopes that one sticks. And whether the person pays or the insurance company pays, and I have seen insurance companies pay, I mean, they'll pay $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, I mean, for a nuisance claim, which is crazy. You see this person who, should be receiving, 5 pennies, and they're getting this type of money. It's absolutely crazy. But, 2 things they could have done in that scenario. Number one, if they did operate out of a protective entity, that would have given them some insulation. And then I always tell people, if you can't come in the front door, try the back door. If you can't try the back door, try the chimney. If the chimney doesn't work, dig under the house. So even if there's no way to insulate yourself from liability, if you protect the rest of your assets, it's irrelevant. So let's say that a realtor has $100,000 in the bank and a duplex. Well, even if they can't protect themselves from being sued, if they protect that $100,000 in the bank and if they protect the duplex, even if they get sued, even if they lose, they can't lose the money in the duplex.
There's limited collectability.
Correct. So you want to do 2 things. I call it inside out and outside in. You want to protect yourself from as much liability as possible, but you also want to protect your assets, and that way you're covered from both aspects.
Yeah, and I didn't think about it that way. When you're always looking at what do I have and how do I protect it. And even if you are sued, subsequently, you can still be protecting your assets that are around you.
And I see that the biggest mistake there with like business owners. So like when you talk to a business owner, he starts whatever, a corporation, an LLC, it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. I say to them, why did you start this S corporation? And they tell me, well, I wanted to make sure if there's a business debt and business liability, they can't come after me personally. And they're 110% correct. They're good. And then I continue the conversation with them and I say, well, what's your biggest asset? And the majority of the time, the business owner says, my business. My business is the biggest asset. So what I explain to them is you've protected yourself. If the business gets sued, they can't come after you. I said, but what if you get in a car accident? What if you're sued for a slip and fall, a breach of contract, a short sale and foreclosure deficiency? The fact that you own those shares, in this example, the S-Corp shares, that's an asset. So if somebody sues you, just like they can take your money in the bank, just like they can take your real estate, they can take the shares in your company. So you need to make sure that you're not just protecting one way, but both ways fully.
So by putting in the S-Corp, the LLC classified as an S-Corp, if the business gets sued, they can't come after him personally. But if he's personally sued, they can go the other way.
Correct.
How do you eliminate that?
So, again, it depends, right? And it really does depend on the state. I'm not trying to be funny. So, for example, in Florida, S-Corp shares are not protected. So if you own 20%, 40%, 100% in an S-Corp, somebody can take that. An LLC is treated different than an S-Corp. It used to be that if you owned an LLC, the membership interest in the LLC were protected. So S-Corp shares not, LLC interest yes. However, now there's further case law. I think it was June 2010, there was a Florida Supreme Court case called Olmstead, not to be confused with Homestead. It was followed by another case, I think it was called Barber. And what that case stated is that if you have a single member LLC, you're the only owner, there's no protection. So what that means what that means though is this: if you have an LLC that you own 100% of, and it's got a duplex in there, if you get sued, somebody could take the duplex. However, if you have the same LLC but you own 99% and I own 1%, and then you get sued, nobody can take the duplex.
Aha!
So the devil's in the detail.
So it would be working with your attorney or trusted person, et cetera, whatever, to give them 1% of the ownership of your LLC.
Yeah, I mean, I listen.
In theory.
I wish I could get 1% of everyone's LLCs, but I'm teasing. I don't do that. No, but you want to put somebody on there, that a trusted advisor. When I say trusted advisor, I don't mean like a third party. You may put your kids on there. You may put a family member on there. You may put a cousin on there. You may put a friend on there. I'm not advising, hey, go give your attorney a percentage.
Right.
My point is just to say, hey, a single member LLC is not protected. A multi-member LLC is protected. But I don't think we're done. So what I mean by that is that LLCs have only been around for 40 plus years. In law, that's not a long time. So today it's single member LLC not protected, multi-member LLC protected. I believe in the future, I don't know if it'll be a year or 5 years or 10 years, there'll be more court cases. Well, is 99.1 okay, or does it have to be a minimum of 95.5? Hey, can you give it to a family member or a friend, or does it have to be a real business transaction where you have a real partner? So we're still learning the law 40 plus years later, and it's going to be evolving. So as an asset protection attorney, you have to be 5, 10, 15 years ahead, where if this happens, what can you do?
How are we going to tweak things? Yeah. I think everyone in real estate after 2024 knows that a penny or 1 or 0.01% is more than zero. That's definitely one of the themes that came out of here. So it's you have kids, right?
Yeah, 2 boys, 9 and 4.
9 and 4.
Yeah.
So they're not quite into the asset protection conversations yet.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have 3 boys myself, and I can't say I talk real estate with any of them.
You have to. You got to teach them.
Investing in real estate, yes.
Yeah.
As far as the actual transaction aspect, I want them to pave their own journeys.
For sure.
My oldest actually is probably going to be an attorney.
Okay. I'm sorry for that.
That's okay. Being where I am right now, my biggest regret in life is not becoming an attorney.
Yeah. But I always tell people, I say, being an attorney is great. It's such a great deal. So what I mean by that is, to be an attorney, if you go to law school, it takes you 3 years. Now, if you do go at night, or if you go during the summers, you could easily do it in 2.5 years. So to become a lawyer and call it 2 to 3 years, to me, that's a pretty good deal. When you compare that to a doctor, I mean, the doctors go through
10 years.
endless school, then a residency. I mean, it's never ending. And I always tell people it's great to have that attorney background, even if you don't use it. So whatever job you go into, whatever business you do, to have that law degree just gives you so much.
It's kind of funny. I've hired a few people who did have their law degree, and I look at them like, okay, you have a law degree. What are you doing here?
Yeah.
Like,
but they got the job, right?
They did.
And that's what I tell people. I don't care what job you apply for.
All but one of them, actually.
We won't talk about that. You want to be a school teacher. You have one applicant, a normal school teacher. You have another one with similar characteristics, but they're also an attorney. A lot of times it'll help you get the job. Again, I'm not telling you to do it just for that, but I don't think it can hurt.
Right.
Although a lot of people don't like attorneys.
Yeah. I'll leave the judgment to each their own. So most of our listeners are real estate agents and brokers that try and have takeaways. So I want to make sure we have good takeaways from today.
Sure.
If they didn't have any already, you need to clear your ears because we've already had some productive conversations. But with that being said, what would you say, could be stuff we've talked about, would be 3 main tips for a realtor or a broker that they should be looking at on analyzing their own business and their own assets, or having that information to advise others to protect in the event of the inevitable lawsuit?
Absolutely. So first of all, own nothing, control everything. If you own something, you can lose it. Let me repeat it. Own nothing, control everything. If you own it, you can lose it. So if you have a brokerage account, a checking, stock, bond, CD, money market, savings account, whatever it is, if it's in your name, you can lose it. If you have real estate, obviously absent your primary home in Florida and some other places, if you get sued, you can lose it. If you own shares in a company and you get sued, you can lose it. So I always tell people, own nothing, control everything. Because if you own it, you can lose it. So that's number 1. Number 2, use protective entities to protect your assets. To me, it's the coolest thing in the world. Just like you and I are different people, we have different social security numbers. If you get sued, they don't come after me. If I get sued, they don't come after you. You and your protective entity are different people. So when I say a protective entity, that's like an LLC, a limited partnership, whatever the business entity is. But like we talked about before, if the real estate's in your name and you get sued, you can lose it. If the real estate's in the name of your protective entity, the LLC, you can't lose it. So that's number 2. Number 3 is look into exemptions. Exemptions are assets that are automatically protected by state law. So for example, in Florida, your home is protected. Your life insurance is protected. Your annuities are protected. Your retirement accounts are protected. Your wages are protected. So you don't even need to spend $1 protecting yourself. And if you invest as a Florida resident in just those different asset class types, you're totally protected. And I can keep going and going and going. I mean, tenancy by entirety. It's for husband and wife. So this is a type of protection. It's only for husband and wives. If you're divorced, can't do it. If your spouse dies, can't do it. But if you title something, and again, it doesn't cost you a penny, tenancy by entirety, husband and wife, then the asset's protected against the lawsuits of one spouse. So I'll give you an example.
50% of it.
Husband's got $100,000 in his checking account, he gets sued, he loses it. Wife has $100,000 in her checking account, she gets sued, she loses it. If the husband takes his $100,000, the wife takes her $100,000 and puts it in one account. So now they have one account with $200,000. If the husband gets sued, they can't take a penny. If the wife gets sued, they can't take a penny. They can only try and go after that money if they're suing both the husband or wife, which normally doesn't happen. Normally, maybe one sued for a car accident, one sued in business. My wife tells me every day I only married her to get the extra tenancy by entirety protection. She may be correct. But there's so many things you could do, and I can go on and on and on.
So wait, go back to that for 1 second. If the property is owned by husband and wife, tenants by the entireties, right? And they have separate checking accounts. Husband gets sued, wife gets sued separately, separate items, they would both pay that out. But if they had a joint bank account and only one is sued, that bank account is protected?
Correct, and it costs you 0.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah, and what you'll do is you'll go to the bank and you'll say, hey, I want a tenancy by entirety bank account. And they'll have no clue what you're talking about. But what the account needs to say is it needs to say John and Mary Smith, comma, husband and wife, comma, tenancy by entirety.
And that's it.
Doesn't cost you a penny. So now, there's sometimes you might not want to do it, right? Like if you're on your 5th marriage and you have a prenup or a postnup, you don't want to bring those assets together. But if you have a good marriage and you don't mind holding things jointly, or you already do hold things jointly, why wouldn't you do it? It's an extra layer of protection that doesn't cost you anything.
If you're on your 5th marriage, your heart is the asset you need to protect.
If you're on your 5th marriage, maybe you're having fun. I don't know.
That's true. That's true. But don't put a ring on it that time. Okay, so what else should we know about you, Hillel? This has been tremendous information. I know I already had takeaways and I thought I knew what I was talking about, so thank you. I'm going to go to my bank after this. That doesn't work. Not for me anyways, in the current stand. What else should we know about you, or how to learn more information about the wealth of knowledge in your head?
First of all, my journey, my mission now is really just to educate as many people as I can. We do probably well over 50 paid presentations every year where people will pay us to come in and speak to them, whatever the group is. So my goal right now is just educate people. If they go to our website, we have a wealth of information, probably hundreds if not thousands of pages. The website is www.assetprotectionattorneys.com. That's www.assetprotectionattorneys.com. And as long as they mention your show, I'm happy to send them complimentary copies of our latest book. So if they want to learn more, go to our website, tons of information, and happy to send them the books.
Awesome. Appreciate that very much.
Look, for every 60 minutes you spend making money, spend 60 seconds thinking about how to protect it.
Got it. I feel like it should be longer than that. There's so many people that go on about our business, right? And you build something and you turn around and you have to look and say, oh, hey, that's at risk. This is what's on the table right now. And it's too late at that point.
People never think about it, and it's unfortunate, right? Because our whole life we're taught grow, 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 make money, acquire. Nobody ever tells us to protect it, but we can work 20, 30, 40 years. There's one lawsuit and we lose it all. And I'm even okay if we do something wrong. But the fact that we could be sitting at this table and one of our family members, friends, employees, whoever it may be, they can do something which could result in us losing everything we worked our whole life for.
It's incredible. It's incredible and scary at the same time. I had tremendous takeaways from today, and it's important to consider your liabilities before they become an issue. You can protect yourself now. You can't look back and protect yourself later, and that's noble. I appreciate you, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.